So, welcome. Good morning, Florida. Good afternoon, Vienna. Hello, Michelle. How are you
Hello,
doing? Good
Elizabeth.
morning.
Doing very well. Thank you for having me again for another week.
Absolutely. And look at this. Now LinkedIn is letting me go in. So we are live on LinkedIn, and it looks like we are also live. There was a technical difficulty, but we're live in both now, but at a different location. So Michelle, if you're able to find that location, it should be on my profile and you can just post it in our group because we had a lot of troubles this morning. And when I say this morning, I mean Florida morning, because actually it's 2:00 here. So, right. So here we are live with our theme today, which is leadership presence, your brand message. So this is part 3 of our five-part series that Michelle and I will be sharing with you throughout the month of October. My braces are still kind of newish, so I'm struggling to speak, but doing my best. So if you can hear us, if the sound, everything looks great, let us know. We'd love to see you in the comments so we know you found us at this new location. And today, what are we talking about? We're talking about branding, personal branding, leadership skills, and career advancement. So, Michelle, did you get that link posted? Did you find that?
We're still not live in the session.
Ah, no, we're not going to be live. And today, what are we talking about? We're not going to be live in our session, but in the new room. It's a post brand message on my page. Did you see that? Tricky stuff. Well, I'll just get there. Maybe you want to talk through the introduction and I'll try and get to that.
Oh, here we are. I found it.
Awesome. High five for you.
New room. Let's go.
That's it.
Here we go. All
So if
right.
you can share that, we'll try and gather our folks, our people together because we want to talk about this. This is super valuable, super great information to use, whether you're currently in a leadership position, leader of ideas, people, or process, or you want to be a leader of ideas, people, or process. This session is valuable for you, and we want you to have it. And as I said, I'm live, finally live here with Michelle Alexandrowicz, the CEO and founder of Engage, which is a boutique talent consulting resource. Because you know what? Business problems require people solutions. I love that tagline. It's so good. And she's joining us from Miami, Florida. And I'm Elizabeth, the founder of talkwithecm. And I'm a verbal branding expert showing you exactly how to communicate with confidence. And I'm joining you live from Vienna, Austria. And we're here to bring you value. So if you can hear us, give us a thumbs up. If you like value, use emojis, like, interact, comment. And most importantly, what we want you to do is continue this conversation with us after the session, right? It's not just a one and done, drop you kind of thing. So let's start off with the kickoff question. Do you want to give us that question, Michelle?
I would be happy to because, this is something that I'm still learning and trying to wrap my head around. So your expertise on this is going to be absolute gold today. So, Elizabeth, I'm not a brand manager. I don't work in marketing. So help me understand, why would I need a brand message? I'm not a product, right? I'm a person, I'm a company. So why should I have a brand? What's behind that? Can you unpack that for us?
I love that question. I really love that question. It's one I hear quite a lot. I mean, we all know that there are brand managers and people talking about brand as influencers and things, but why me, right? So let's start by unpacking this exactly as you said with what is a personal brand? And I often find it's easy to start with what it's not. It's not just the colors. A brand, it's not just the colors. Coca-Cola is not just red and white. And it's not just a specific font. And it's not a great headshot. That's important. It's not a logo. I think of a personal brand like, I love analogies. So I think of it like a signature. When you sign your name just on a document, when you sign your name on something, it's something we've created, we decided and shaped at one point, and we carry it as our own. It's identity somehow, and it carries a lot of weight. And your personal brand is how you show up in the market if you're looking for a job, in the company if you are a manager of a lot of people or a CEO, or if you are in charge of departments, and also in the community. And this was something we talked about, I think, in the last session, about how, when you show up in a lot of different stakeholders and you're facing a lot of different groups of people, it's how people know you, your skills, your experience, your values, and it's your reputation, right? Your
How
brand.
people talk about you.
Yes. And that
Ah.
you mentioned in the last session, how they're going to be talking about you at the dinner table when you're
Yeah.
not there.
Mhm. When you're a
How are
leader.
they talking about you when you're a
Yeah,
leader?
exactly.
Yeah, you're
So
the
your
face.
brand is what speaks that through.
And it's the brand, for me, you think, well, it's who I am. They're talking about me as a person. Yes, but it's about deciding and being intentional about how you present yourself, both online and offline, and having consistency there. I think we've all met people who have a great sales face or forward facing image, but then behind closed doors, when it's a different story, that's tough, isn't it?
Okay. So there has to be a connection between the forward facing and then how you show up in the day to day as well.
Exactly, exactly. And it's the combination of everything you're bringing to the table. It's your values, your skills, your experiences, stories, which we're going to be talking a lot about today. Sure, it's your personality, but it's also your image, it's your face. Are you presenting yourself as a professional or more a sporty person, a maverick or a soft, touchy feely person? These are all presented to your audience, and that's brand is the combination of both this visual image of you and the verbal, the words and that you choose to speak and write and share. So it's kind of combining it all. So what do you think about leadership, and where do you think brands, because I think, Michelle, you're really in touch with this, about who could benefit from this? Where do you think there might be especially important for someone to think intentionally about their brand?
That is a really good question. And when you first asked me that, I was kind of stumped when we talked about this because we kind of talked about the difference between leadership presence and leadership brand. And one of the things that you really brought to the light on and what made me think of is as an executive, if you are an executive in a company, I think your leadership brand becomes very important and very crucial. You talk about being intentional with how you show up, right? So, not just what your style of work is, but as an executive, you're overseeing an entire company or an entire business unit. So, there has to be intention behind how you present yourself as a leader. And one of the big things that comes to mind, and I hear this a lot from my clients, is I think executives need personal branding to align themselves to their company because the company has a brand and the company has values, and you as an executive have values. You also have a brand. So I think you have to find that sweet spot where you represent the company, but also yourself as well, because your stakeholders need to understand who you are. And I think that comes out through your brand because not all your stakeholders, you're going to see them on the day to day. You may be in charge of 500 employees. You're not going to see them every single day in the day in, day out kind of tedious work, right?
And
So I think
especially
it's
not in a meaningful way.
right. So
If
it's
you're
your
all in an
brand.
auditorium, okay, great, you can see them all, but yeah.
So, what I'm learning from you is that it's your brand that really helps make that connection to your stakeholders. As executives, you're outward facing to your community. You're going to be in newspapers. You're going to be on social media. You are a name now, an executive with this company that carries some weight. And I think you have a very powerful opportunity to use your executive brand to make movement in your culture.
Yes.
One of the I think about is with change management. I have a lot of clients approach me about change management and the difficulties behind that. And when you talk about leadership brand, Elizabeth, I think about how powerful an executive brand can be when you're trying to move an entire company, an
Mm.
entire group of people. So
And
those are
you'll
some
be
of the
the
things that come to mind.
consistent.
So branding is about creating that consistency in understanding who you are. And do you know what the underlining of that is? It's trust. So this is crazy because we're talking about your personal brand, but very quickly we were able to bring executive branding and your personal leadership branding into that ability to do change and to
Yeah.
make impact in the culture. Like that's huge. That's so huge.
It's so important. I think, one thing we talked about earlier as a founder and CEO yourself, one thing about having a personal brand versus a company brand,
Mm-hmm.
because, the personal brand, like it often gets kind of melded and meshed together, right? And when you're building up a company or building up a job or a role or a business or whatever you're doing, it's, your personal brand is yours and it doesn't belong to the company. Ideally, they're aligned.
Mm-hmm.
But as a company owner, for you especially, I think this is a key distinction because you created the company, you build up the business, you created the culture, you're shaping it, you're owning it. That's what it's about, right? And then one day in the future, if you build up a company, you can sell it for millions, yay, and then do whatever you want to do next. But if you were to walk away from Engage right now, let's imagine this, for whatever reason you're going to walk away from Engage right now. So Engage will stay engaged.
Mm-hmm.
But what are you taking with you?
So what you're asking is what's the difference between the company and me? So as an owner, there's a lot of overlap.
Absolutely. But it's your personal brand that you take with you.
Yeah.
That's
And
that's your signature. It's who you are. It's your skills, your experience, your knowledge, your grit,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
your values, brand voice, strategy, innovation. These are all yours, and no one will ever take that away. And what's wonderful about building up a personal brand as a leader, as an exec, is that this is yours forever, no matter what company you're with. This is the consistency. And when you change and develop your career, you're taking and developing your brand with you.
Right. Yeah, that makes a tremendous amount of sense. That distinction, but the overlap, right? Because I'll still, one day when I leave, like those values stay with me. And then Engage or whatever company that you're working with, it's their own journey. It's its own entity with its own brand, right? So, and I see this a lot with companies that go through evolution and changes and mergers and acquisitions. The brand of the company changes and moves, but the leaders within don't. And I'm not saying they should or shouldn't change, right? But like that personal brand of who you are will always be yours. So I think understanding that distinction and the roles that they play for me has been very powerful. How your brand can shift and move the work and how you work to align them and integrate them and capitalize on each of their strengths and abilities.
And I think it's probably a reason why so many people aren't clear about what a brand is or what a personal brand is or why we need one, is because it is kind of shaping and shifting and being shaped by and changing as we grow and develop as people.
Right.
And it should be.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you would ask me you want people to remember from this talk, Elizabeth, I would say thinking about your personal brand. Like, think about it, because it puts you in charge of the narrative. It puts you in charge of the story, what people say, what people think, because your brand is evolving, whether you want it to or not. And every time you're using social media, or if you have an email list, write a blog, speak to groups, or a manager, it's already building and shaping. Your personal brand is being formed, not filmed.
Mm-hmm.
It could be filmed.
Yeah.
But the question is, are you building this brand intentionally, or are you outsourcing it? Or are you simply just leaving it to the hands of fate? And I want you to take control of your own personal branding.
I love it. Yeah, the intentionality is the piece that really sticks out for me because what you're teaching me is if you don't intentionally do it, your brand will be built for you.
Yes,
Mm.
absolutely. Absolutely. And by taking control, it ensures that you're the one forming ideas in people's minds and their opinions of you, and you're in control of the story. And I think, especially in your experience, I mean, what can you imagine or what do you see happening? What are the costs of not having a clear brand and not showing up prepared with your own branding? What do you think?
I think
Or what
that's
have you
such a good
seen?
question. Like, what's the cost of not doing it? Because I would argue that most executives are not intentional about what their leadership brand is, right? So here's the thing: if we are not intentional about our leadership brand, like you're saying, it gets built for us. And if it's built for us, that means it's probably not really in alignment or it's not quite reflecting the things that we want, right? So, what that creates is this kind of mystery box. Who is Elizabeth? Who is Michelle? Like, what type of leader is she? If I don't have clarity around who she is and what she does, is it creates this mystery, it creates ambiguity, it creates uncertainty. And let me tell you, ambiguity is such a killer in organizations. Do you know why? Because when we are faced with an ambiguous situation, we don't understand it. What our brains do is it fills in the blanks.
Or,
And if
oh,
you have someone
yes.
else filling in the blanks for you, what that does is it creates this uncertainty and it can break down trust. And all of a sudden, when trust is broken down, now you're swimming against the current. And as a leader, your job is to kind of create that current and create that followership towards whatever vision you're trying to bring your people towards. But you need the part of doing that is your brand.
Mm,
So again, to me, it's so incredible how you make the connection between the executive branding all the way to organizational trust and the trust that you
absolutely.
have with your stakeholders and viewers. Like that's what it comes down to. You need to build trust as a leader. And part of the way that you do that is you build your brand.
Absolutely. And just put it out there. Actually, I'm having a very real, tangible experience with this. My daughter just started school.
Uh-huh.
And I heard through the grapevine, the director. So here's someone who has not worked on her brand. The director's kind of strict. She's not so nice. She's, difficult to talk to. And I was like, well, it's the director. It doesn't matter because, we're just going to the school. So it's with. Now that she's in the school, I'm getting a very different opinion. And I haven't spoke to the woman once in my life. So all I'm dealing with really is her reputation, the
Mm,
stories people are telling about her. And I assume these are not stories that she would wish told about herself because they're not nice stories. Whereas if she had taken ownership, she could be a maverick, she could be, a fighter, she could be, all these positive things. But no, 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 that's not what people are saying. And it's like, it's giving me as a stakeholder, as a parent, a very uncomfortable feeling. I'm getting a black
mm,
box. I don't see in. So you want to talk about the trust and people filling in the blanks. This is playing out in front of my very eyes exactly as you explain it.
mhm.
Exactly as you explain it. Maybe I should talk to her about branding or just
Oh,
communication
great.
in general.
Yeah. Because we all face challenges, like, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it comes down to how you portray that and what's the story or what's the takeaway you want people to know about what your intention is, right? Because
Mm,
there's probably a good heart in there, but it's not getting out. That's not the message being received. Why? It's not being intentional.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. So we wanted to dig in today, and we're quite behind schedule because of our technical difficulties, but that's just a-okay. We're gonna jump right
Right.
in. So what I'm gonna do is, oops, wrong button. I'm going to pull up the shared screen and show you the roadmap that we had before with the tiles. And when I share this, you're probably gonna see, there we go. And I'm having some Boop, 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 boop. There we go. Pulling up the screen now. Super duper duper. So we've jumped in. We talked about what is a brand. If you're just joining us now, we talked about benefits of having a brand, the costs of not having a brand, a personal brand. And now we're going to dive into, so you know what it is, you know you want it. At least that's what I hope you're thinking right now, that you want it. And now we're going to talk about how to get it, how to start, how to just even begin with this whole question. So I've shared before, and I don't like the Zoom here. Let me see. Can I make that bigger? So Michelle, can you see that?
I can. You're in a
Cool.
good space. Yeah.
Great. So I've shared this blueprint before, and today we're at middle level there. So this is the Start Your Conversation with Success Masterclass, and with 9 clear steps to clarify your words, build relationships, and go from invisible to completely irresistible. So this is the course that we've been kind of picking through and looking at in the series that we're doing. And last week we talked about the base level with you, your rock solid foundation, magnetic attraction and mindset detox. Today, this week, we are diving in to your message. So if you follow that track around, you see the Fascination Formula, Story Makeover Magic, and Agility Framework. So this is all about your message, your brand message or brand story. You can use a lot of different words to get to the core of that. And we're trying to talk about how to get it. And I love analogies. So I think about it as 3 basic steps, those 3 tiles you see there. And it's kind of like baking a cake, because you're going to need the first tile. What we have there is a Fascination Formula. And there we're talking about messaging mastery. And it's like the ingredients. You're going to need flour, you're going to need eggs, maybe chocolate. Do you want organic, dairy-free, whatever it is? What are the ingredients that you need in your brand and your brand story? So this is about finding the exact words you need to get the biggest impact. The second tile is the Story Makeover Magic. So this is the recipe. How do we put all this together? So this is a series of exercises and guidebooks that show you how to gather all those ingredients and then putting it together, not just slapping it together, because that cake is going to sink, right? So we want to put it together so it's nice and fluffy. And this is about crafting a compelling story for your brand that sparks action, because most of us want to call people to action, either to think differently, act differently, unite, do something. So that's what it's about. And that third one, the agility framework, for this one, I think about it like the presentation. So I've got the ingredients, I have the recipe, I put it all together, and now how do I present it? Am I going to make it into cupcakes with like cute little, what are those cupcake wrappers called? Or am I going to put deco on top with like 3-tier cake? Am I going to carry it in a cake carrier, plate it nicely? So this is, how am I presenting it to others? And so it's about consistently presenting your brand across all media and touch points. So whether you're speaking to someone face to face at a networking event, or you're putting out a LinkedIn post, or you're doing a company-wide presentation, are you working with your team? What are you doing to maintain that consistency? Right? Because when you're doing it day in and day out, you're not saying the same thing over and over and over, but we want it to be consistent. So that's kind of the big overview. And we don't want to dive too deeply in it, but I want to show you, I want to pull out one piece. And Michelle and I were talking earlier, and I think this piece might be kind of the most impactful, if you will, about intentional storytelling. So I'm going to juggle my documents around here. So this is a look at the story framework, and no fail messaging checklist is what I want to pull out today. And this is when we're talking about the agility framework. So once you already know what are the pieces of my story, what are the stories, some people have so many stories, and they kind of run into diarrhea mouth where it's just all coming out. And then other people have, a great big block and nothing's coming out. So it's finding, okay, what are the ones we want? What are the ones we don't want? And evaluating them and finding out which ones work and don't work for you and your brand. And this one is, okay, once you have those ingredients, once we've talked about the story, once you kind of know what you're talking about, I find this document is super for adjusting it to a specific situation or a specific need. For example, if you're going to be doing, let's say, a pitch, or you're meeting, maybe let's talk about change management. What could you give me a specific example where we need to speak as an exec, we need to think about a brand, and we need to connect with people? Let's think of an example.
Yeah.
Give
So
me a
with change,
challenge.
yeah. So with change management, it's all about speaking the vision, right? Like, where are we going? And more importantly, why is it worth the pain of getting there? Okay. So, one, that's communicating the message. But again, going back to the executive presence, every leader is going to have a different brand or a different approach in how they tell that story. So, some leaders might be like, let's go, let's drive, let's move. Other leaders, depending on their brand, might be much more collaborative, make sure everyone's here.
And on
Others will be more
board.
enthusiastic. Others are going to be focused on the details of the how do we get there. So I think this is an opportunity to think about your leadership brand and how you're going to show up to speak the vision of change management.
Right. So, all right. So we're in a situation, we're meeting with our team,
Okay.
right? Or the whole company. What do you want? Give me a challenge.
Let's go for the whole company. So
The whole company.
town halls are very common when we're talking to everyone about the change, right?
All right. So here we go. We've got the setting and the audience. So it's the whole company.
Whole company.
So we've got everyone there, every department, every level, town hall, boom. And, time and stages come over here to this part. This is where, for example, at a networking thing, I might have a 10-second pitch and then a 30-second pitch, if they're showing interest further. Now, in a town hall kind of thing, I'm probably going to have a fixed amount of time. So I don't need to think about this so much. Okay, I have 5 minutes. Okay, I have 1 hour, whatever it is. Then I want to make sure when I'm speaking, I want to add a personal touch, something about me, something that's relatable. This is so important if you want to connect with people, if you want to initiate change. I'm going to skip over some of these. This is more in the story part. Use stats that work for you. Embrace the struggle. It's about creating a story. So it's more reminders. Remember what you want to do and have your key statement in there. This is just make sure to do it for this specific situation. But here, I want to, as soon as I stop having notifications, exit. Oh my goodness. Okay. So over here to this, how should they feel? How should they feel? And you think, well, they shouldn't feel anything. They should just listen to me. And I want to get a quote from Maya Angelou, and she said, I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I think this is a really powerful statement. And I think about, for example, a few years ago, I had my second grade teacher visit Vienna. I was super excited. I met her, everything. Can I remember what she said? No. No, I have no memory. Like, I'm sure she read us stories and taught us letters, but no memory. Do I remember what she did? Yeah, barely. But I remember how she made me feel, and that will never go away. And that's why I went out of my way to connect with her while she was here and made that effort.
Yeah, that's such a powerful quote. We hear that a lot. And I think those are words that we hear and talk about as leaders. But again, are we intentional? How do you want your employees to feel?
When
How do
they
you
hear
want your
you
employees to feel? Mm-hmm.
And this means not only every day, which is important, but after they hear you give this 20-minute speech
Yeah.
or this town hall meeting or whatever time frame it is, how should they feel during the talk, after the talk?
Mm.
And the next one, what should they remember? What do you want them to walk away with? If there's one sentence, what should it be? And of course, this is one most of us can remember, the call to action. What should they do? And having that compelling call to action, right? So I find this checklist just helpful for being intentional, having it front of mind when you're getting ready. Because of course, when we're writing, we think, how do I start? Beginning, middle, end, put in a joke maybe. But having those elements, and most of these, as I said, the reason why it's so small there is because those elements you've already developed in the first 2 steps. And it's just making which specific ones.
Maybe you can validate this a little bit because I think a lot of us have heard these components before, especially as leaders. What's the call to action? I don't think I've heard as much, how do you want them to feel? But I I think I want to say this is difficult to do. I think these things are easy to say, but they really are difficult to execute. One of the things I always say is, obviously people are complex. 2 plus 2 always equals 4 in math and science. But when it comes to people, you can do the same message 2 times in a row to maybe 2 different groups of stakeholders or even just 2 different departments, and you'll get 2 completely different responses. And that's what makes leadership so difficult, because part of communicating your brand is to people. So that
Mhm.
means every time you try this, you might have to go back and edit and reflect, not necessarily yourself, but how you're going to portray that out.
And I would even say it's harder than that, because even if it's with the same people on different days.
Yeah. Because then you start to say the same thing over and over. And if you don't have your brand message accurate, you just start to sound like a broken record and you
Which
don't have
also
that authenticity, right? So this is hard work, Elizabeth, that, you're putting out there for us to do, but it's crucial.
but the benefits are fantastic.
Ah, yes.
The
Mhm.
benefits make it worth it. It is hard. It is hard, but like any new skill, the more you do it, the easier it gets. I filled one of these out for the session. Just a few minutes, just being intentional. Okay, how do I want people to feel? What do I want them to remember? What's my key message? Just mentally making sure. Now, for those of you who care about the environment, like I do, it was a digital form, not a paper form.
Yeah, but
But
you wrote it down. You got it out of your head, and
mhm,
whether you're typing it or writing it, whatever, you're taking the time to be intentional. So imagine if every time before you addressed your group or every time before you had a town hall, you said, okay, how do we want them to feel? What's the one thing we want them to walk away with, right? And what's the one piece of my executive brand that I want to
yeah,
inspire or breathe
yeah.
into this
And a
moment?
lot of that can be reverse engineered. When I think, okay, I want to create this feeling, I want this outcome, this result. Then I pull this story because it fits.
Mhm.
Because I'm not going to stand at the front and say, I want you to feel compassionate. No, sorry, fail. But I pull out the story.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So this
that
is, if this is a good moment to shift into, executives being able to tell their story.
please.
Um, I ran a program years ago. We talked about it in some of our earlier sessions, and this program that we ran had a waiting list out the door. We always had people waiting for this program. And while it was a great program and a great presentation, the piece that made it powerful was we shared stories to
Mm,
reinforce the lessons that we were trying to teach. And when we would bring on new staff members, we would take them through a very crucial process that took months and months to help them cultivate telling their story.
mm,
And this is something that I try to encourage the leaders that I work with. is to tell your story. So if we give a workshop on change management, if we give a workshop on building strong teams, as often as possible, if it's internally with a company, I try to bring a leader in and say, okay, you're going to tell your story to this group, right? It's
Absolutely.
inspiring, it's encouraging, but more importantly, it
Creates
reinforces, it
connection.
creates connection. And what does that do? It builds trust
Yeah.
within the organization, right? So, executives, if you don't have a story or two or three that you can kind of pull off your shelf, that is crucial work that we need to be able to do. It creates more followership. It creates mentorship in your high potentials. It creates that inspiration. It creates that buy-in and that trust. I think as an executive, your most powerful tool is your story. And that
Mm,
is part of your executive brand.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. In fact, I think due to time constraints, we're going to wrap that up on that super positive, super meaningful note because I mean, that's what it is with stories. As humans, we're hardwired for stories. We love them. I mean, why do you think Netflix is so successful? Like, we just can't get enough. Hollywood. And yeah, leadership. Of course, when you're bringing that story, you're creating connection, you're creating meaningful connections,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
meaningful connections with followers and supporters and your community. I love it.
Exactly.
It's absolutely crucial. And to wrap up, just to go over what we said you have a message, something you want people to know, to do, to like, to take action on. And for all the reasons that we said today, you want a brand, a personal brand of who you are. And now you even have a few ideas and a few, not only why you want it, but a few how to start, what's important, and what's the process you can go through. And most importantly, Michelle and I are going to be doing this is part 3 in a 5-part series throughout the month of October. So we'll be here to Halloween. And the most important thing that we want you to do is keep this conversation going. So please like, follow, share with anyone that you think will benefit from this message, comment, send private message, give emojis, all the things to continue this conversation with us.
Awesome. This has been a fantastic conversation today.
I am so glad you were here. I'm so glad that we got through that technical hiccup and you were able to support getting everyone shifted to the other room. And yeah, that's life. That's how it goes. But having a meaningful purpose to join together makes it all worth it.
Cool. Good. We did
So
it.
thank you so much. And we'll see you next Wednesday.
See you next week. Thank you, Elizabeth. Work on your
Ciao.
stories.
Thank you.